Following an intense battle in orbit, which saw a Separatist Recusant-class dreadnought destroyed by Republic forces, General Grievous was forced to flee to the surface of Saleucami on board a C-9979 landing craft. However, while on descent, the C-9979 was struck by debris from the battle in orbit, and the crew of the landing craft were forced to abandon ship in several escape pods, leaving them scattered across the surface of the planet. Seeing the evacuation of the Recusant-class dreadnought, Republic forces pursued General Grievous down to the surface of the planet. The primary objective of Republic forces in this engagement was to capture General Grievous and bring him to justice for the crimes he'd committed against the Republic and the rest of the galaxy. Meanwhile, the primary objective of the Separatists was simply to escape the engagement. At the start of the engagement, Separatist forces were scattered across the surface of Saleucami, many of the forces on board the C-9979 having perished in the crash. All Grievous had left were a handful of survivors clustered around the remaining escape pods. On the other hand, Republic forces were able to land an Acclimator-class assault ship and unload a significant number of infantry and armored units onto the surface of the planet. Once the Republic forces had deployed, they began making their way toward the crash site for the C-9979, while the Acclimator returned to orbit to rejoin the ongoing battle up in space. At the same time, the cluster of battle droids under the command of General Grievous realized that the transmitter in their escape pod had been damaged, and that they had to make their way to one of the remaining escape pods to attempt to call for rescue. When Republic forces arrived at the C-9979, they found it completely destroyed, and came to the conclusion that anyone on board would have died, but that all of the escape pods had been deployed. Seeing this, the decision was made that Republic forces would branch off into two different groups. A primary column would start advancing towards the next escape pod, while a scout group would swing around and investigate other potential crash sites for Separatist pods. The scout group was primarily on speeder bikes, while the primary Republic force was using a mixture of infantry and ATTEs. The scout force, led by Captain Rex, was, however, ambushed by a pair of Separatist snipers that left Rex injured and forced the scout group to take a detour so that Rex could receive medical assistance. When the Republic column arrived at the crash site of the escape pod that General Grievous had ridden down to the planet, they found it completely abandoned. They then deduced correctly that General Grievous had begun making his way towards another escape pod in an attempt to call for help. This is when Republic forces began planning a pincer maneuver, with the primary Republic column advancing on the crash site for the final escape pod, while the scout force would swing around from the side and hit them from behind. Ahead of the advancing Republic forces, Separatist forces were able to regroup at the final remaining escape pod and call for assistance from the fleet participating in the battle up in orbit. However, at that time, Republic forces began advancing on the final escape pod, and Separatist forces were forced to take defensive positions. The Separatist forces, however, only had infantry on their side, while the advancing Republic forces did have a significant amount of heavy armor. Republic forces began carrying out what was essentially a frontal assault directly against the escape pod, advancing their column of ATTEs towards the Separatist defenders, who were using things like rocket launchers in an effort to stop the advancing Republic armor. Luckily for Separatist forces, however, evacuation came sooner than expected, with a single Sheathipede-class shuttle swooping down to pick up the survivors. However, the conflict on the ground was too heavy for the shuttle to land, and they were forced to carry out a more haphazard evacuation, where General Grievous himself used a grappling hook to pull himself up to the low-flying Separatist shuttle. He was the only member of the Separatist forces that were present on Saleucami to escape the engagement, with the rest of the droid forces being overrun by the advancing Republic troops. With Separatist forces being forced to flee the planet, the Republic forces were able to claim Saleucami for the Republic. However, General Grievous had escaped, meaning that the Republic had failed at their primary objective in this engagement. The battle in orbit would end shortly after that, with Republic forces successfully driving off the Separatist fleet, ending the Battle of Saleucami in a Republic victory, but one that didn't necessarily achieve all of its goals. If you'd like to learn about the battle in orbit that left General Grievous stranded on the surface of the planet, I'll leave a link in the upper right-hand corner to my battle analysis on that. And if you have any other engagements you'd like to see covered in future episodes of Battle Analysis and added to the archive, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.